They say you never truly know someone until they betray you. And when that betrayal comes from the two people you trusted most in the world, it doesn't just break your heart. It shatters your entire reality. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how my husband and my best friend destroyed me, and how I made absolutely certain they both paid the price. For 10 years, I thought I had it all figured out. A successful career as a marketing director, a beautiful home in the suburbs, a husband who I believed loved me unconditionally, and a best friend who had been by my side since college. Lisa and I were inseparable. We'd been through everything together: breakups, job losses, family drama. She was the sister I never had. Or at least, that's what I thought. It was a Saturday morning when everything changed. One of those perfect autumn days where the air is crisp and the leaves are golden. I was supposed to be at a work conference in Chicago, but it got canceled last minute due to a scheduling conflict. I decided not to tell anyone and just come home early to surprise my husband, David. I pulled into our driveway around noon, excited to have an unexpected weekend together. Maybe we'd go out for lunch. Maybe we'd just relax and watch movies. Simple pleasures I'd been craving after months of working late hours. But when I opened the front door, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Coming from upstairs. A woman's laughter. And it wasn't coming from the TV. My heart started pounding. My hands went numb. I stood frozen in the hallway, trying to convince myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe David's sister had stopped by. Maybe he hired someone to clean and she was laughing about something. But then I heard her voice clearly. And I recognized it instantly. It was Lisa. And then I heard my husband's voice, low and intimate, saying words I'd only ever heard him say to me. Words that were supposed to be ours alone. I don't remember walking up those stairs. I don't remember opening the bedroom door. But I remember what I saw. The two of them. In my bed. In the bed David and I had picked out together on our 5th anniversary. They didn't even notice me at first. They were too wrapped up in each other. And when David finally looked up and saw me standing there, his face went white. Lisa sat up, pulling the sheets around her, her eyes wide with shock. But neither of them said they were sorry. Not right away. They just stared at me like I was the one who had done something wrong by coming home to my own house. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. The way they looked at each other, the comfort they had in my space, the complete lack of guilt in that first moment, this had been going on for a while. And that realization changed everything. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't throw things or make a scene. I just stood there, staring at them, waiting for someone to say something that made sense. Anything that could explain what I was seeing. David was the first to speak. He got out of bed, threw on his pants, and started stammering. Emma, we didn't mean for this to happen. Didn't mean for this to happen? I repeated, my voice eerily calm. You didn't mean to end up in our bed with my best friend? Lisa finally found her voice. She was always good with words, always knew how to talk her way out of trouble. But even she seemed shaken. Emma, please. Let us explain. It's not what you think. I laughed. Actually laughed. Because what else was there to do? Really? Then what is it, Lisa? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think it is. David ran his hand through his hair, a nervous habit he'd always had. We've been seeing each other for about 6 months. 6 months. Half a year. While I was working late, building my career, trusting both of them completely, they were sneaking around behind my back. Building a relationship. Making plans. Laughing at how clueless I was. 6 months, I whispered. And neither of you thought to tell me? Lisa had the audacity to look annoyed. We didn't want to hurt you, Emma. That's why we kept it quiet. We were trying to figure out the right way to. To what? I cut her off. To tell me you've been sleeping with my husband? To announce you're in love and I should just step aside. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. That's exactly what they'd been planning. They were going to wait until the time was right, break my heart as gently as possible, and expect me to just accept it and move on. David tried to reach for me. Emma, please. I never wanted it to be like this. But Lisa and we connected in a way that. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out. My voice was steady now, cold and clear. Both of you. Get dressed and get out of my house. Now. David looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my eyes must have warned him not to. He and Lisa scrambled to get dressed while I stood there watching them, memorizing every detail. Every guilty glance. Every whispered word between them. As they walked past me, Lisa tried one more time. Emma, we need to talk about this like adults. We can't just. We're done talking, I said. You're done talking. You both made your choices. Now live with them. They left. And the moment the door closed behind them, I allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to fall apart. 5 minutes to cry, to scream into a pillow, to let the pain wash over me. And then I pulled myself together. Because crying wasn't going to fix this. Being devastated wasn't going to make them pay for what they'd done. But careful planning? That would. Over the next few days, I did something I never thought I'd do. I became a detective in my own life. I went through David's phone records, his emails, his credit card statements. I checked Lisa's social media, her tagged locations, her photo timestamps. And what I found was so much worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't just been seeing each other for 6 months. They'd been planning a future together. David had been looking at apartments for them to move into. Lisa had been researching divorce lawyers for him. There were text messages talking about how I'd probably be fine once the shock wore off, how I was too focused on work anyway to notice what I was missing at home. They'd been to dinner at our favorite restaurants. They'd taken weekend trips to places David and I had talked about visiting. He'd given her jewelry that looked suspiciously similar to pieces I'd pointed out to him, thinking he might get them for me. But here's what really made my blood boil. Lisa had been staying in our guest room at least twice a week for the past 4 months. She'd told me she was having problems with her apartment's plumbing and needed a place to crash while it was being fixed. And I'd believed her. I'd welcomed her into my home, made her breakfast, listened to her complain about her life, all while she was sleeping with my husband down the hall. The level of deception was breathtaking. These weren't two people who'd made a terrible mistake. These were two people who'd actively plotted and schemed, who'd looked me in the eye and lied over and over again, who'd laughed about how easy it was to fool me. I also discovered something else. Lisa had recently started a new business, a boutique marketing consultancy. And she'd been using connections I'd introduced her to, clients I'd worked with, resources from my network. She'd built her entire business on my relationships and reputation. That's when the full plan started forming in my mind. They'd both taken from me. My husband. My trust. My dignity. Lisa had even taken my professional connections. So I was going to make sure they both lost something equally valuable. I started with Lisa's business because that was the easiest target and the most satisfying. See, in our industry, reputation is everything. And Lisa's reputation was built entirely on lies. I reached out to several of the clients she'd taken from my network. Not to badmouth her directly, that would have been too obvious and unprofessional. Instead, I simply mentioned, casually, in conversation, that I'd heard she was struggling with some personal integrity issues. That I'd discovered she'd misrepresented some of her qualifications and experience. I provided proof. Emails where she'd claimed to have led projects that I'd actually managed. Presentations where she'd used my work and passed it off as her own. Testimonials she'd fabricated. Within 2 weeks, 3 of her biggest clients dropped her. They didn't make a fuss about it. They just quietly ended their contracts and moved on. And in our industry, when multiple clients leave simultaneously, other potential clients notice. Her business started crumbling. New leads dried up. Her social media engagement plummeted. She went from posting confidently about her success to desperately offering discounts and promotions. But I wasn't done with her yet. I also reached out to our mutual friends. Not to tell them what she'd done with David, not yet. I simply started mentioning, in conversation, times when Lisa had lied or manipulated situations. Small things I'd noticed over the years, but never called out. Times she'd borrowed money and never paid it back. Times she'd spread rumors. Times she'd taken credit for other people's ideas. I planted seeds of doubt. And once people started paying attention, they noticed the patterns themselves. Lisa's social circle began to shrink. Invitations stopped coming. Group chats went quiet when she posted. She was being isolated, slowly but surely, and she had no idea I was behind it. David was more complicated. We were legally married, financially entangled, and he had legal rights I couldn't just ignore. But I could make the divorce as painful for him as possible. First, I documented everything. Every text message, every receipt, every piece of evidence showing his affair. In our state, infidelity mattered in divorce proceedings, especially when it came to asset division and alimony. I hired the best divorce attorney in the city, someone with a reputation for being ruthless and thorough. I told her everything, showed her all my evidence, and asked for one thing. I wanted David to lose as much as legally possible. She smiled when I said that. We can definitely make that happen. David had been staying with a friend since I'd kicked him out, and he'd been texting me constantly, apologizing, begging for a chance to talk, saying he'd made a terrible mistake and wanted to work things out. I didn't respond to any of it. Silence was my weapon, because I knew it was driving him crazy. Then the divorce papers arrived. He called me immediately, his voice panicked. "Emma, what is this? You're really going through with this? What did you expect?" I asked calmly. "Did you think I'd just forgive you and take you back? I thought we could at least talk about it. We've been together for 10 years. And you threw those 10 years away the moment you touched her," I said. "We're done, David. My lawyer will handle everything from here." But here's where it got interesting. Because of the evidence I had, my attorney was able to argue that David had not only committed infidelity, but had also wasted marital assets on his affair, the hotel rooms, the dinners, the jewelry he'd bought Lisa. In our state, that mattered. The judge agreed. I was awarded the house, the majority of our shared investments, and alimony for the next 3 years, since I'd supported David financially while he built his career. He was furious. He tried to fight it, but the evidence was overwhelming. He'd cheated, he'd lied, and he'd spent our money on his mistress. There was no defense. But the best part? The absolute best part of my revenge? I didn't even have to do much to make them destroy each other. I just had to set the stage and watch them fall apart. See, David had been living with Lisa since I kicked him out. And at first, they were probably thrilled. Finally, they could be together openly. No more sneaking around. No more lies. But here's the thing about relationships built on betrayal: they don't have a strong foundation. They're built on lies, secrecy, and the thrill of doing something forbidden. Once that's gone, there's nothing left but the reality of who these people actually are. And reality is never as exciting as fantasy. David lost his job around this time. Not because of the affair, his company didn't know or care about his personal life. He lost it because he'd been distracted, making mistakes, missing deadlines. His performance had been slipping for months, and they finally let him go. Without income and buried in legal fees from the divorce, he became financially dependent on Lisa. And Lisa, who was already struggling with her failing business, suddenly had to support both of them. The resentment started building immediately. I know because I stayed in touch with a few mutual acquaintances who were still in contact with them. They told me about the arguments, about how David felt emasculated, about how Lisa blamed him for ruining her life. If we hadn't been caught, everything would be fine, she'd apparently said to him during one fight. "You're the one who was stupid enough to bring me to your house." And David had fired back, "You're the one who kept pushing to spend time there. You said it was exciting." They started blaming each other for everything. For the divorce. For the lost income. For their ruined reputations. All the passion that had driven them together was now turning into poison. Lisa kicked David out after 3 months. He had to move back in with his parents at 38 years old. His mom, who had always loved me, barely spoke to him. His dad was disappointed and made no effort to hide it. Lisa's business never recovered. She had to shut it down completely and take a regular job at a company where no one knew her. She went from being her own boss, running her own consultancy, to being an entry-level employee again. And me? I rebuilt my life piece by piece. It's been 2 years since that day I walked in and found them together. 2 years since my world fell apart. And honestly, I've never been happier. I got promoted at work. Without David's constant neediness and Lisa's fake friendship draining my energy, I was able to focus fully on my career. I landed the biggest client in our company's history and earned a corner office with my name on the door. I traveled. All those places David and I had talked about visiting, but never did because he was too busy or not in the mood. I went to Italy, to Japan, to New Zealand. I took myself on the adventures I'd been waiting for him to want. I made new friends. Real friends. People who valued honesty and loyalty. People who showed up for me without ulterior motives. And it was amazing how much lighter life felt when I wasn't carrying around a friendship that was secretly poisonous. I even started dating again. Nothing serious yet, but I'm open to it. And I've learned what I will and won't tolerate. What I deserve. What real love and respect actually look like. David tried to reach out a few months ago. A long, rambling email about how sorry he was. How he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. How he realized now that what we had was special and he'd thrown it all away. I deleted it without finishing it. Lisa tried too. A text message saying she missed me. That she hoped one day I could forgive her. That she never meant to hurt me the way she did. I blocked her number. Because here's what I learned through all of this. Forgiveness isn't something you owe people who destroy you. Some people don't deserve a place in your life, no matter how much history you have with them. And cutting them out isn't cruel, it's self-preservation. Some people ask me if I regret how I handled things. If I think my revenge went too far. And my answer is always the same. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret making sure they faced consequences for their actions. I don't regret refusing to be a doormat. They made choices. They chose to betray me. They chose to lie. They chose to hurt me in the deepest way possible. And I chose not to let them get away with it. That's not cruelty. That's justice. If you're going through something similar right now, if someone you loved has betrayed you, I want you to hear this. It's not your fault. You didn't deserve what they did to you. And you don't have to forgive them just because other people think you should. You are allowed to be angry. You're allowed to feel destroyed. You're allowed to take time to heal. And you're absolutely allowed to make sure they face consequences for their actions. But here's the most important thing. Don't let their betrayal define the rest of your life. Don't let it make you bitter or closed off or afraid to trust anyone ever again. Use it as fuel. Use it to become stronger, smarter, more resilient. Use it to build a life so incredible that when they see what you've become, they realize exactly what they lost. Because the best revenge isn't just making them suffer. The best revenge is becoming so genuinely happy without them that their absence becomes the greatest gift they ever gave you. David and Lisa destroyed the life I thought I had. But in doing so, they freed me to build the life I actually deserved. A life without lies. Without betrayal. Without people who saw my trust as a weakness to exploit. And that life? It's better than anything I had before. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, David. Thank you for showing me exactly who you were before I wasted another decade on either of you. I'm free now. And you too? You're stuck living with the fact that you destroyed something real for something that was never going to last. That's a prison you'll be in for the rest of your lives.